Celebrate every day like it was New Year's. I'm gonna open my eyes like it was the first time. Let this miracle of life bring me alive. I'm gonna dance every time that I hear the birds sing. Wanna fly just as high, Jah, give me the wings. I am infinite potential and all that it brings. Love of the universe, luminous beings. We are love of the universe, luminous beings. We are the
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Bring Me to Life podcast. This is going to be our very first episode in a series of episodes on the topic of sacred sexuality. Amara, Amethyst, who is the host of this series, talks about how this energy is the most powerful energy that we have as humans, and if we can learn how to heal this part of our lives, we can find healthy, happy, and magnificent opportunities for ourselves. She also touches on topics like consent, communication, and getting over old programming. So it's going to be a really awesome episode. Amara is a wonderful and pure teacher. She's the priestess at Nectar of the Goddess Temple, which is a mobile sacred space. She's been doing a lot of research and a lot of study on this topic for many years. So I'm really looking forward to sharing all of her insights with you listeners. Her guest for this episode, for the first episode of the series, is Cody Lotuslight. He's the creator of Race to Transparency Retreat. So without any further ado, please enjoy episode 102 of the Bring Me to Life podcast, Sacred Sexuality Series, Part 1.
Today we're going to be talking about sacred sexuality and reclaiming our sexual sovereignty. This is the first in a really juicy series about sacred sexuality, and I'm so grateful to be here with all of you. My name is Amara, Amethyst, and I'm here with my dear friend, Cody. Cody, do you want to say hi, too?
Hey.
Hey, Cody.
Super happy to be here, too. Excited for our conversation.
So we're really looking forward to this conversation and many other conversations to come. Sacred sexuality is one of the most empowering and most fun forms of awakening and enlightenment. These spiritual techniques have been used since humans have existed to advance ourselves, to grow, to learn, to create in this world that we live in, and to also transcend into union with the divine. So now we all live in such an amazing time as this, where we have access to all of this information from different cultures and different schools of thought and practice of sacred sexuality. At certain times in the past, this information has been closely guarded from the majority of people and was only shared with adepts, with spiritual adepts or with royalty of some form, and the other people who the royalty would be sexually interacting with. So this is such powerful information that it was closely guarded and kept from most people for a really long time. And it continues to be kept, in some ways, kept from the majority of people. But so this podcast and a lot of other sources of this ancient wisdom coming forth and being shared again, for example, in different types of workshops or programs or online offerings, are really bringing this information to wider segments of the public. And it's a beautiful time to be here because we have access to so many different resources basically instantaneously. So it's a really beautiful time to be here, and especially for those of us who really resonate with being here for a purpose and being here for a spiritual purpose and a purpose to support the awakening and shifting of consciousness. Those of us who identify with terms like light worker or starseed or healers or leaders who believe that there is a new paradigm of reality that is being created now, it's vitally important for us to really take responsibility for our creative energy and our creative power. And sexual energy is the most powerful creative power that we as humans have access to. So it's very important for us to understand this potent energy that we're working with and to be able to direct it in ways that we desire. So, for example, to create a new project in the world, or to create a new human life in the world, or to uplift ourselves spiritually towards awakening or enlightenment, or whatever it is that your personal belief is around that. So throughout time, sexuality has been used not only to elevate ourselves and to create new life, but also to manifest desired outcomes through sexual alchemy, through sex magic, through powerful sacred practices. And we can also use this potent and juicy energy to create that which we desire in our lives. We often are told that sex has a certain meaning. Like we have been told lots of different stories about sex from the society that we live in, be it from various religious beliefs or the consumer-based society that many of us live in. The media tells us certain things about sex, for example. Our education system tells us certain things about sex. Our government, our different religions, they all have stories about sex and about us based on how we express sexually. And so you might want to take a minute to think about some of those stories, or perhaps they've already popped into your head just from mentioning them. I personally feel like there's a lot of buildup of expectations and sort of a weight of all of these stories, that we can then feel that weight being shifted onto us based on how we are perceived by those around us. And as we continue our reawakening, a lot of times we realize that these stories which have been told to us are not true, or they don't feel resonant with the truth in our hearts, with who we truly are. And it's time for us to let those stories go. Some of them have a lot deeper impact on us than others do. Some of them are a little bit more challenging, perhaps, to let go of, and that's okay. But it's our responsibility as sovereign beings to listen to what we and others are telling ourselves or telling us, and to test that against what we believe or know to be true, and to then decide what we want to do based on that input and that feedback from ourselves. So, for example, some stories that we're told about sex include gender stereotypes and other types of specific narratives that have provided us with extremely limited views on sexuality. And so, for example, for females, it's often socially decided that if somebody who is identifying as a female is being sexually active with multiple partners, then she is slutty, or there's some shame associated with that. Whereas sometimes the impression of somebody who identifies as a male having multiple sexual partners or multiple sexual prospects, sometimes that's seen as like a good thing, or like a power symbol or a status symbol. And so just taking a look at those types of things, taking a look at how sex is portrayed to us as being dirty or wrong outside of marriage or shameful, the cause of the original sin, those are all, that's pretty heavy stuff that we're told. And yet we all come from the result of sex. So I think that these are really deeply rooted stories that are told to us. And it's vitally important, as I mentioned earlier, for us to be able to really take a critical look at that. Who is telling you that? Why are they telling you that? And is why they say they're telling you that actually why they're telling you that? Sexual energy is some of our most powerful energy that we have. And so by separating us from it, by creating those feelings of shame and fear in us around sexuality, then that serves to keep us separated from this creative energy. Cody, do you have anything you want to add to any of that?
Yeah, it's so important to recognize how powerful that creative energy is, and just all the many things you can do with it to improve your life, as it were. And it really speaks a lot to like why that was suppressed so heavily, that the awareness of that, and that the people suppressing it don't want average people on the street or in society to have access to anything they want in life. And and that's why it's so amazing, so incredible that we are reclaiming this knowledge and disseminating it out with much more broad appeal, and finally, the veil is lifted, and we're sharing all these secrets that were guarded so heavily for so long, and we need all of the secrets too, because the problems facing humanity are just gigantic, and it's going to take all of our combined creativity to solve the problems or the challenges, as it were, of this century. And I think that sacred sexuality is like one of the most awesome paths to solving those issues. Because everybody likes to have sex, or at least most people do. And if we can kind of change the story around that, from one of shame and blame, like you were talking about earlier, into like co-creative celebration and ecstasy. There's a lot like ecstasis as the foundational energetic signature of flow states, and then like flow states being how you manifest and create in the world. It's like, let's start having sacred sex all the time and create a more beautiful world every day.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Cody. I think that, I really liked what you were saying about ecstasis being, I don't remember exactly how you put it. Do you remember that part where you were talking about ecstasis and the flow state and manifestation?
Yeah, it's like the fundamental energetic signature of flow states. And then flow states are the precursor to easy manifestation.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like,
Thanks.
alter your consciousness to just unleash yourself on the world in ways.
Yeah, that's great. And so as we're learning how to feel and harness and direct our sexual energy, then we can elevate our energy levels, elevate the vibration of the energy that's flowing through our energy field, through our body, through our physical body, our energy field, our spiritual body, and we can also learn how to replenish ourselves. So we can replenish our energy stores, our life force energy, with our sexual energy by recirculating that through our physical body. We can also elevate the sexual energy into life force energy and then into spiritual energy as well, which can be then focused towards our spiritual advancement. So it all is related to this ecstatic feeling, this blissful, sensual, sexual, embodied, yummy feeling that we can experience with ourselves or with a lover or with lovers, and being able to, as you said, then manifest much more easily.
So juicy.
Right? Yeah, that's pretty juicy. And it's exciting too, because many of us really feel the deep connection, we feel a deep sense of purpose in being here, and we feel how we're really at a turning point in terms of humanity, in terms of the planet, in terms of consciousness. And so it's really important for us to show up for that. Many of us have this feeling. Do you agree, Cody?
Yeah, 150%. It's just like this is a huge turning for everything. It's like the major axis for all of time.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It is. It really feels like that, a major axis for all of time. And so in order to fully show up here, we have chosen physical form, we've chosen to be in body. So it's really important for us to be embodied. A lot of times people associate spirituality, especially when they're maybe beginning, or maybe they're coming from a background of a certain other religion or spiritual practice that focuses more on what happens after we die, or the next lifetime, what's coming next. Really, it's important for us to be embodied, for us as our soul essences, and our higher selves to come into this body, this physical form, as much as possible. And as we bring more of our higher selves, or our soul essence, or however you like to connect with that idea. So if any of the words that I'm using don't resonate, don't work for you, I invite you to just replace them with a word that does work for you. It's my intention to empower everybody with this information. So it's important to me that, if I'm using a certain word, hopefully that doesn't put you off so much that the overall message gets distorted. It's not my intention to be offending anybody. Just sharing my beliefs and the research that I've done. But anyway, so as I was saying, it's really important for us to be embodied, to come into this form, so that and when we bring more of our soul essence, more of our higher self, more of the divine, when we become more aligned with that and bring more of that energy into our form, then we're able to express more of that energy through this form into this world, which is what we came here to do. And a really, as Cody was saying, a really fun and juicy way to do that, to connect with the divine, to raise our energy, is through sacred sexuality. And through our sexuality. It's my belief that our sexuality is absolutely sacred. It's a beautiful, holy part of us. And it's beautiful in any and all of the forms that it expresses in. We've got a lot of programming that we are working through, and that we're recognizing, accepting, seeking out the ways that it shows up in our lives, and then releasing. And then when we release these old programs, we create space into which more divine energy can flow, more inspiration can flow, and space in which we can create new programs for for our forms to follow. So we can clear out. A lot of times we have things that we need to, old programs relating to sexuality that are ready to be let go of, and that it's important for us to work through and let go of as we're beginning this next phase of embracing the sacredness and the power of our sexuality.
Yeah,
and sometimes, yeah, and I think this might be a good place to talk, if you wanted to mention, Cody, anything about how that can sometimes feel like an existential threat.
Oh, yeah, sure. Culture in general is like the boundaries of the consent that's been established in our lives, and by society, by our parents, perpetuated. Society and culture is us. It's everybody, all the time, every day. And through all of our interactions, we kind of establish this container, or these boundaries of what acceptable behavior looks like. And then a lot of people get really attached to how things were when they were growing up. They, like Amara was saying, the old programs that we take on, and the beliefs that are just given to us by other people, programmed into us. Like literally, that's what's happening. However, those beliefs were programmed into the people programming us, were programmed into those people all the way back to wherever they initiated from. And so they have a lot of history and a lot of momentum, and can appear very powerful to the people that accept them and choose to link their identities to these programs. And then when new programs show up, when new people with new ideas and different ways of doing things, different insights and perspectives, that are sharing those and saying, hey, we could do this differently. What about this? That can, and probably often does, appear like an existential threat to the old guard, as it were, the people who are still holding on to the old programs and perpetuating their propagation for whatever reason. Usually it involves power, money, prestige, something along those lines. And the existential threat comes, it's like, from the new perspective, from the new energy, it's like, what? These people are way overreacting. Like, we're not trying to change them or overthrow their very existence. Like, we can live peaceably side by side. But that's not true in the mind of the person in the old program, because they've created like a false slippery slope argument for themselves, that if any piece of their paradigm is challenged, then there's a cognitive dissonance that threatens to reveal the bias that they have that's not reality, that's not true. So they have to like double down on their beliefs and not allow any chink in the armor, because any chink in the armor can lead to the slippery slope of total reality change. You know, it's like, that's why the hippies were so demonized by the authority figures. So there's like a faux slope argument that
faux slope
comes into play that creates the idea of an existential threat when people are holding on to programming in the face of new ideas.
Yeah.
And that's what we're here to gently and gracefully assist those people to whatever extent they're open and willing and consenting to release those old patterns and accept the new ones if they're wanting to do that. Yes, exactly.
Thanks, Cody. Yeah, I agree. I think that we are here to just facilitate a shift and create opportunities for people to connect with. Maybe it's new information to them, or maybe it's information just being presented in a slightly different way. And we invite everyone who feels like they're ready to continue this learning and growth to keep on joining us for this. I think that it's a really good point to just be aware that this feeling of an existential threat is possible, not only to those people who are maybe in positions of power and who are the ones who are doing the programming, but also to those of us who have been programmed. Sometimes when we're reawakening, as Cody mentioned, we feel really attached to these programs because sometimes we internalize them as part of our own identity. And so, again, we come back to showing up and doing this work that is here for us to know ourselves, because Cody and I were talking about this a little bit earlier as well, and he mentioned how reliance on preset rules is the anti-consent. So if we're relying on something that we've been programmed to do, or if we're just doing it blindly because we've been programmed to do it, we're not consenting to do that. So we really invite everybody to examine this as you are remembering your sacredness, as we're all remembering our sacredness, our power, our divine beauty and grace, to really take a look at these belief systems which we are choosing to follow. And are you choosing to follow it because it feels good and is aligned with who and what you are? Or are you choosing to believe it because you've been choosing to believe it all your life, and changing what you believe feels scary? Or you're not even aware that you've been believing that you had a choice, that you could choose to believe something else. You always have a choice to choose to believe whatever feels best to you and empowers you the most. And so we can choose how we relate to our sexuality. We can also take the responsibility, because that's really what it is, for choosing how we wish to interact with one another in terms of the types of relationships we would like to have, the types of physical interactions we'd like to have, the types of energetic interactions that we would like to have. And we'd love to share some more information about those choices and about consent. So right now we're really, consent is really up in the collective right now with Me Too, and Time's Up, and It Was Me, and all of these movements bringing awareness to the amount of non-consensual sexual interactions that have been happening. It's inviting us all to take a deeper look at what that means for us, and to reclaim our sexual sovereignty, reclaim consent from our programming. And so I'd like to invite Cody to share more about this with us.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Amara, for setting that up so nicely. The meta conversation about consent is so important, because, and I think a lot of people don't really have it, and or if they're exposed to it, maybe a lot of people seem to have a first reaction of like, oh, that's really awkward. Like, why would I want to like talk about what I want or like ask what other people want? Like, why can't I just like do it and just have fun and not worry about anything? Like, well, because that's not really fun for everybody involved. So what is fun, though, in the context of sacred sexuality is when you get the chance to both empower another person and be empowered yourself by speaking what your truth is in a moment. And I can get into that a little bit more in a minute. But really, that's it's so sexy to ask for what you want and to get that yes, or to ask what they want and give them that yes. And then that allows you to proactively move action forward in whatever the circumstances. Obviously, the context of this conversation is sacred sexuality, but I really want to emphasize that it's much more than just intercourse. Like, this shows up everywhere in life. And I'll touch on that a little bit more later, too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the most amazing thing about this consent, moving the action forward and being empowering, is that you get to eliminate second guessing. You know, I'm sure many of you have had the experience when you're getting hot and heavy and like action is really progressing, but you're not sure exactly like when they're ready for what or what to do next. And like, then there can, doubt enters into our minds in a moment. It takes just the slightest uncertainty, and then we're second guessing ourselves, or we're second guessing our partner or partners, and wondering like, oh, what actually is wanted and needed in this situation, if you're taking time to reflect. But if you're proactively talking to each other about what you want and what you need, then there's no second guessing, and you can just move forward and fun, instead of second guessing and like fear and wondering like what's okay. It's just enjoyable. And that seems really simple, doesn't it? Just check in. Yeah. What do you want? What do we want? What do they want right now? Consent is an ongoing conversation that can change at any moment, because we're dynamic beings. We're not static. Like, we don't just have one way of being, and then that's always who we are forever. That would be super boring. Instead, we're fantastically dynamic, always changing in a moment to whatever is going on in our environment, and with our thoughts and with our intuition and our connection to higher self, or whatever your divine understanding is. We pull in desire from the energetic field around us, and then we can express that much easier when we're working with consent and talking about what we want. And so, like, the question then is, like, if that's, it seems so simple, and like that obviously who wouldn't want that? But there's so much ambivalence and anxiety around that. The conversation, the meta conversation of consent, and so many consent violations of people just not even communicating. That, like, why is that? And the answer I came up with is, I think it just boils down to fear of rejection. Like, people don't want to be told no. But if you look at that, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that definitely fear of rejection is a major player here, and also just the larger society and cultural memes and narratives that were told about, how sex is portrayed in the media, or how sometimes I think also, like, gender role stereotypes play really largely into this, and also the larger culture in terms of all of the things that make up the rape culture as well really, really come into play, which is such a complex topic. But yeah, there's just a lot of energy and motion already around this whole conversation, as you were saying, that sort of frame the conversation as awkward. But I liked also where you were going with talking about, like, why is it framed as an awkward conversation, or what does it mean if somebody is not, if they're afraid of that rejection?
Yeah, I think, well, what it really means is that they're not ready for a yes. If you can't take a no gracefully without upset, then you're not actually ready to do whatever it is that you wanted to do. That's the kind of, like, minimal attachment. I'm not saying, like, no attachment. Obviously, we want to do something, so there's a little attachment there, but you don't want to be overly attached to an outcome. You have to always respect the sovereignty of the other individual or individuals involved, and know your maturity level. And in sacred sexuality, even we go beyond yes to hell yeah or no. Because a meek yes is actually just an unspoken no. A person just, for whatever reason, we can maybe find out, but maybe they don't even know why. They don't feel confident enough to voice their no, and that definitely ties into what you were creating about the media narratives around gender roles and how the sexual experience plays out. There's a very, very defined narrative that the media shows every time there's sex, and then anything that's outside of that specific narrative of, like, guy takes charge, woos the woman, and she falls for him, and he doesn't have to say anything, blah, blah, that's all bullshit, obviously.
Right. And it also totally disregards a major part of the population that is non-heteronormative, and also the population that's, and also the population that is, like, beyond gender binary. So obviously these narratives, from a certain perspective, it becomes really obvious that these narratives that we're given are not actually in our best interest or aligned with our best interest. And the consent is a really empowering way to reclaim our sovereignty.
And definitely strongly aligned with that too is you need to be sober to give consent, like at least for initiating an activity that hasn't been done before. If you take somebody home that you haven't met before from the bar and you're both drunk, like you can't honestly consent to anything with each other. You'd be much better off just sleeping together without sex, and then in the morning when you're both sober or hungover, depending on how much you drank, then you can have a conversation from a place of informed consent about what you both want for your lives. However, there's obviously, again, the media narrative is so strong and so contrary to what healthy, sacred sexuality looks like, that, it says, go to the bar, get fucked up, take people home, have sex, it's great. And I think so much trauma even comes from that, like unrealized trauma. There's unfulfilled expectations, there's disrespect of self, disrespect of other, like non-alignment with divine purpose, all that stuff comes into play, and all that stuff creates trauma. So, like, the verbal gold standard of sober interaction and clear communication, I can't emphasize that strongly enough. Like, it pays off in spades every time. So if you haven't implemented that practice in your life, definitely take on looking at that and see if that's something that you're willing to do. And if you have, then fantastic. Way to go.
And I think, do you mind if I add something to that, Cody?
Yeah, no, please do.
Cool. Yeah, I think so. The invitation is to create verbal consent in your relationships. And this is not limited to sexual relationships. We're talking about sexuality in this podcast, so that's kind of the focus here. But this is something that's really great to do in all of our relationships. And also to have everybody involved take responsibility for creating this conversation. A lot of times in the past, we've heard people talking about, oh, well, if that person didn't want something to happen, why didn't they say something? Which, there is personal responsibility on all of us for being aware of what our boundaries are and speaking them, creating an awareness of what the boundaries are with others. And also, it's great for us to all take personal responsibility for creating a safe-based interaction. And so if you're the person who wants to move things to a new level in terms of sexual interaction or some type of intimacy, then bring it up to the other person verbally. Ask them, maybe share what you're desiring and ask them if they feel the same way, if they want the same thing. So I think it's really important that we don't leave it up to the other person from either perspective, that we don't expect that people know where our boundaries are and will stop at them, and also that we ask people before we potentially cross a boundary. And some people's boundaries are very different from our own. For example, some people don't like to be hugged for whatever reason, or it's uncomfortable for them to be hugged. And so just assuming that it's okay to go up and hug somebody or touch somebody in any way can really cross somebody's boundaries. So if you are somebody who likes to hug people when you meet them, maybe start incorporating, introducing yourself and saying, hey, do you hug? Is it okay if I hug you? And then that gives the other person the opportunity to say yes or to say no. But either way, regardless of whether they say yes or no, they feel recognized as an individual and respected. And then so it's building a relationship either way, regardless of what their answer is.
Yeah, definitely. And especially with the hugging thing, like so many kids are forced to hug, whoever, relatives or parents or visiting friends or anybody. And so it's like their sovereignty is taken away from them. They're not respected as being able to make their own choices. And so that becomes really important later in life, that they can, I have a good friend who described that exact situation where she just was like, had no control over her body. Her parents told her what to do, when to do it. And then when she became an adult, like, she was like, I'm not hugging anybody for a long time, until she was finally in a group that emphasized consent around hugging, and she was able to finally discover that she could enjoy hugs and like really like them, as long as she got to make the choice about her body and who she hugged and when, and and then that extends to everything. So yeah, that's a crucial point. Thank you for bringing that in.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, that's great. I love that story. Do you have any other points about consent that you want to create?
Yeah, I mean, just a couple quick things. Just, consent is a critical practice to healthy sacred sexual interaction. That's kind of what we've been creating all around us. And you can navigate blame and shame are a minefield of just waiting to happen, explosions and upsets and fights and blah, blah, blah. You said this, you did this, you didn't do this. But consent lets you navigate that minefield and avoid stuff that doesn't need to come up, and lets you get to deeper work faster. And you can just check in frequently for seamless enjoyment of whatever is there to be enjoyed. Not saying that you won't ever have upsets or anything like that, but you can avoid unnecessary ones. And the benefits of doing that extend way beyond intercourse, because when you have established consent with people and established yourself as a person of integrity around their consent, then you open up a space for vulnerability and deeper mutual exploration, which is really what we all want, right? Just to connect with people on deeper levels and get to know who they are more authentically. And so, my invitation is just distinguish opportunities for practicing consent all the time. Figure out a way, if you have a partner, make it a game for fun, or just do it with yourself and your friends, whoever you talk to about these types of topics, and even maybe surprise yourself, challenge yourself, and talk to some of the people that you don't usually talk to about these topics. And see what kind of game you can make about consent in your life. And because ultimately lack of consent is a lack of sensitivity and negotiation, and that leads to lack of opportunities in life, which that sucks. And personally, I'm out to play a game called Omni Win-Win, which means everybody wins all the time. There's no losers.
That sounds like a fun game.
Yeah, right? And consent is a crucial piece to that. You have to be able to communicate accurately with trust and vulnerability, and accept no's and negotiate with sensitivity all the time in order to create omni win-win situations. So go out and create consent for your wildest dreams. Literally anything you want in life can be accomplished with the proper amount of consent, and engage all of your delicious, juicy, delightful senses into that game of omni win-win around consent. And I wish you all luck.
Thanks, Cody. Yeah, that sounds really fun and juicy. Only win-win with a lot of consent and sensual experience. Yes, please.
Yeah. Doing it.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks. So
you're welcome.
that I feel like that was probably the most juicy conversation I've ever had about consent.
Winning.
Yeah, which is great because, as you mentioned right at the beginning of what you were sharing, a lot of times even just having a conversation about consent can start to feel a little bit awkward or stifled or like academic in a way, but that was really fun. So thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me, inviting me onto your podcast. This has been an absolute pleasure and so much fun.
Great. Yeah, Cody and I love working with you, Cody. It's always a pleasure. Yeah. I just wanted to also touch on a couple of other things as we're wrapping up here. I wanted to talk about some of the when we're talking about consent, we're really talking about communicating with others and also in really knowing ourselves and what we want, what our boundaries are, what our desires are, what works for us, what doesn't work for us. So that requires a lot of self-awareness and self-acceptance, and also requires a lot of acceptance of the others as well when we're interacting with others. And I think these are really valuable skills to have in general, in all aspects of our lives, just as consent is important in all aspects of our lives. And so just really creating a space for that in our lives, because this continual process of becoming more self-aware is a process that takes energy and time, and in some ways takes some form of commitment as well. And so creating the space for this process in our lives can really help us to actually achieve that process, doing that process. So if we're wanting to explore sacred sexuality and invite these sacred ways of relating with our sexual life force and sexual expression, then it's really important that we create the container for that in our lives by creating space for it, by creating a space that is free of shame and blame. So Cody was also talking a little bit about shame and blame earlier, and how that often will play a part in consent violations, for example. So if somebody accidentally crossed the line or purposefully crossed the line with somebody, there can be a lot of shame and blame involved in that. And also, there can be a lot of shame and blame involved with our sexuality. Many of us have some sort of sexual trauma of some sort, and so there's oftentimes blame and shame. So blaming another person, or blaming the circumstances, or blaming the world, and also shame, feeling bad, feeling like we did something wrong. That can go along with that. But if we can get to, I believe that we can all get to a place where we are not attaching our minds to repetitive thoughts about blame and shame, and where we can recognize that those repetitive thoughts are happening and choose to end that program, so to speak, choose to replace it with something else, with acceptance of what is, and with growth and expansion, with authenticity, so with being ourselves. And this process of really reclaiming our sovereignty, reclaiming our power, reclaiming our sexuality. This process allows us to be more authentic, to be ourselves more fully, and also to accept ourselves and others more fully. It's a really powerful and beautiful process to be working through or playing through. And we can do this in did you want to add something?
Not in this moment. I was just agreeing,
okay.
like,
Okay, great. So we can use this process, so sacred sexuality, with a partner or with a healer of some sort, and we can also explore this on our own. So this doesn't require having a partner or having a partner who's interested in sacred sexuality. You can do all of these explorations yourself as well. Some practices, of course, work better with a partner or work with a partner, and there are lots of things that we can do ourselves, exploring sensual self-play, for example. So sexuality is a very embodied force. There are energetic exchanges going on, and there are also oftentimes physical exchanges going on. And so really getting into the body, really feeling that sensual bliss energy, and also feeling the energetic aspects, the sexual energy moving through your body. So some things you can do are just sensually enjoying some time loving yourself and becoming aware of how your sexual energy or how your energy is moving throughout your body, throughout your energy field. If you have that type of awareness, you can bring your awareness to different parts of your body or energy body during this sensual self-play and love, and just start to become more aware of that. And also just notice if there are any thoughts or stories or programs that start to come up in your mind, in your emotional field as you're doing that. And if they do start to come up, just allowing them to be there and allowing yourself to let them go for now or for good, if that's possible, and just continue with your, self-play and self-love. These are things that we can do on our own anytime that we feel comfortable to do that, to sort of get the juices moving, get the energy moving, and to start to reprogram ourselves into aligning with sexuality as a sacred thing versus as something that, however we may have viewed it in the past. And just also understanding that this bliss, this sexual energy that you're feeling is you. It is you. That's why it feels so good. It's you. And it's sacred. It's divine. It's holy. It is source energy. We are source energy. And as we feel this sexual energy flowing through us, it can feel so good because it is you, and you're just merging more and more with the fullness of what you are, which is sacred and divine.
Yeah, and that experience, really, what I enjoy most about that is it brings out like childlike joy and wonder, just the love of being alive and having experiences, and just celebrating for no reason other than you want to.
Yeah, exactly. Celebrating and exploring and expressing and feeling that joy and bliss. And an aspect of sexuality as something sacred also has to do with having an intention for the sexual energy that's moving. And it could be that your intention is to explore, is to feel joy and bliss. Or your intention could be to manifest a certain thing that you're desiring to have in your life, or to manifest, for example, like a relationship or a physical object or abundance or peace on earth or whatever your desire is.
Or all of the above.
What's that?
All of the above.
Yeah, it's just check off all the boxes. Yeah, but in the cultural narrative about sex, it is not necessarily viewed as something that is particularly intentional, unless you're trying to get pregnant or have a child. It's not really portrayed as being something that is important to bring a lot of awareness and intention to. And since it is our most powerful creative energy that we have access to, of course it's important to do that. And so just having that awareness can really change the way that we choose to express our sexual energy, and perhaps the people that we're choosing to express it with, or people that we're choosing to not express it with any other people for a while. However you're wanting to show up is perfect for you, as long as it's aligning with your intentions. And so this, again, is an important space for communication. Does the other person view sexuality the same way that you do? Do they view sexual expression the same way? Does it mean something different to them? Do they like to relate in a different way or in the same way? Talking about all of those things can be really gratifying, because it allows people to be themselves and show up as themselves authentically, and to be seen and heard for who they are and where they're at. And it also allows us to choose if somebody, maybe does have a different definition of what interacting sexually means to them, then we can choose with that information and understanding how we want to proceed. So it can be really freeing and enlivening. And I think that also just having this new view of our sexuality as something that's sacred and powerful is really enlivening and is really empowering as well. And I hope that everybody has received something of value from this episode of our Sacred Sexuality podcast. And I hope that you will reach out if you have any questions or comments. We'd love to hear from you, and look forward to sharing with you again really soon. Yeah.
Goodbye, everyone. Thank you for listening.
Thank you all again for tuning in to this episode. I really hope that you enjoyed it. We will be coming out with a new episode of the Sacred Sexuality series bi-weekly for the next few weeks, so continue to check in with us. You can visit us and find more information about what we do at bringmetolife.com. If you have any questions, thoughts, comments, or concerns, just click on the contact tab on our website. Love you all so much. Have a great day, and thanks for listening.
Thanks for shining on with us.